The kitchen was my sanctuary, the heart of my home, where every aroma carried a memory, every simmer whispered stories of the past. The wooden countertops, worn smooth by decades of kneading and rolling dough, held the invisible imprints of my ancestors' hands. Often, I would stand there, breathing in the scent of garlic mingled with rosemary, lost in quiet reveries of family gatherings once alive with laughter and warmth. Those moments were sacred, the recipes more than food. They were vessels of love, heritage passed down through generations, crafted with patient hands and enduring passion. My grandmother, in particular, had been the steady heart of those meals, and her wisdom flavored every dish, anchoring me to a lineage I cherished. Yet, lately, a harsher sound fractured that calm. From the bistro across the street, Rachel and Tom's laughter rang sharp and biting through the neighborhood's usual softness. Their place was dazzling and loud, a universe apart from my humble kitchen. Rachel, especially, wielded her arrogance like a weapon, dismissing my traditions as relics of a forgotten era. Their laughter wasn't playful, it was a sneer, a public repudiation of values I had lived by my entire adult life. I could hear Rachel's mocking voice clearly, reveling in the dismissal of my cooking as outmoded, irrelevant. It wounded me more deeply than I was willing to admit. That evening, the neighborhood gathered in the small square, bathed in the warm glow of fading sunlight. Plates were passed around, the air filled with chatter and the mingled aromas of homemade dishes. I had brought my grandmother's pot roast, slow-cooked with herbs and love, a dish rich with history and care, one I knew intimately. As the neighbors smiled and complimented the familiar flavors, I felt a flicker of the joy those old recipes always brought me. Yet that fleeting happiness was shattered when Rachel's voice soared above the gathering. "Really, Clara," she said, loud and sharp like a whip cracking. "Who still eats like it's the last century? These dishes belong in a museum, not on a modern menu." Tom laughed quietly behind her, avoiding my gaze, as if ashamed or uncertain. The words pierced me with a weight I hadn't expected, like a sudden cold wind on a summer day. In that instant, the space around me seemed to shrink. The familiar warmth of the evening contracted until my breath felt tight and labored. The comfort I once found in my cooking, the legacy I nurtured in every simmer and stir, felt as though it had been stripped away under the glare of their contempt. Their laughter broke the fragile surface of my world and stirred a storm, silent yet fierce within me. I fought to keep my composure, swallowing the bitterness that threatened to spill over. Especially for my son, whose confused eyes sought mine, I held back the tears that welled up like a tide. I remembered all the countless hours spent in this very kitchen, chopping and mixing ingredients with steady patience, infusing each dish with love's subtle touch. This was no mere cooking, it was a testament, a story unfolding through flavors and shared meals. To see it dismissed so casually was a betrayal that cut to the core of my identity. My fingers curled tightly around the edge of the wooden table, knuckles whitening under the strain. This moment was not just a humiliation, it was a fracture in the world I had built, a symbol of the gulf growing between their world and mine. That world valued spectacle over substance, flash instead of depth. I felt more isolated than I had in years, a solitary guardian of fading traditions, looked down upon by those unable or unwilling to see their worth. When the gathering dispersed and the night settled quietly over our street, I remained in the kitchen alone, the fading scent of pot roast lingering like a faint memory. I traced the worn leather cover of my grandmother's recipe book, fingers brushing over decades of stains and folds. Its pages carried the whispers of generations, women who cooked through hardships and celebrations alike, building resilience and love into every word. This book was more than paper. It was a living legacy, a strong thread weaving the past into my present. Though Rachel's mockery echoed still, a different feeling slowly kindled inside me. It was calm, steady, not born of anger, but of clarity. My passion, my heritage, was mine to protect, no matter how harshly others tried to belittle it. That night, in the soft glow of the kitchen light, I made a quiet vow, not with words, but in the stillness of my heart. I would not respond with bitterness, nor meet their noise with louder noise. Instead, I would answer with steadfast resolve and action, letting my cooking become a silent but undeniable voice of truth. I would reclaim my place through unwavering dedication, through the stories carried by the flavors I loved. In the simmering silence of that kitchen, surrounded by history and hope, I discovered the first outlines of my strength. Their world was loud and transient, but I understood then that sometimes silence spoke louder than any shout. In the days that quietly stretched before me, Rachel and Tom's mocking laughter lingered in my mind, a persistent echo beneath the surface of my everyday life. At times, their disdain tempted me to bitterness, anger bubbling just beneath my composed exterior. But I understood that such noise would not reclaim what they tried to steal. Instead, I chose silence, a deliberate pause to reflect, to listen to the deeper voice within that had never been silenced. I settled often by the kitchen window, the afternoon sun filtering softly over my hands as they rested in my lap. In these moments, memories unfurled like old films, images of my childhood kitchen where my grandmother had been the steadfast heart of the home. The text, I could still see her bending over the ancient stove, her hands moving with the grace and certainty of decades, seasoning pot after pot, preparing meals that tasted of love and resilience. But more than cooking, she had told stories, stories woven through the very fabric of each dish, tales of hardship and celebration, of women who fed their families through wars, losses, and joys. Those afternoons with her were lessons far beyond the stove flame. They were lessons in patience, in enduring love, in quiet courage. My passion for cooking was not just a hobby, but a lifeline, a tether to a lineage that refused to be forgotten. I had inherited more than recipes. I had inherited a mission to carry the family story forward with every simmer and every carefully folded pastry. Since my husband's death, the kitchen had been my refuge, the place where grief could take shape and transform into sustenance, where hope could be kneaded into dough and resilience stirred into sauces. But Rachel and Tom's harsh dismissal challenged that refuge. Their mockery felt like a severing blow, not just to my craft, but to my identity and the history I embodied. Yet, as I sat with those lingering pains, a different flame kindled within me. I realized that my heritage was not a dusty artifact to be discarded, but a source of enduring strength. The world might favor novelty and flash, but beneath the surface lay a hungry yearning for authenticity and connection. I began to embrace patience as my quiet ally. I observed the neighborhood carefully, watching who gravitated toward Rachel and Tom's glitzy bistro, their dazzling array of modern twists and theatrical presentations. Yet I saw also those who hesitated, those who longed for something familiar, something real. I noticed the eyes of children brightening when the scent of my kitchen drifted through the air, the nods of elders who recognized flavors of their youth, the soft smiles of families looking for comfort in a hurried, shifting world. I returned to my grandmother's recipes with renewed intention, treating them not as relics, but as living stories waiting to be retold. I tasted and tested, allowing myself to make subtle changes, personal flourishes that honored tradition while breathing fresh life into the old dishes. Stews were left to simmer longer, sauces thickened with patience, spices balanced gently to awaken memories and conjure new ones. With every simmer and stir, a quiet joy grew inside me, warming like the embers of a hearth in the cold. Alongside this culinary revival, the demands of home and motherhood wove around me. My son witnessed the change stirring within me, the quiet focus and the rekindled fire in my eyes, even if he couldn't yet understand its full meaning. Some nights, exhaustion pressed down like a heavy shroud, but beneath fatigue was a steady determination. I was navigating a delicate path between the past that shaped me and the future I was beginning to imagine, drawing strength from both. To give shape to this growing resolve, I reached out to an old colleague, someone who had shared the ups and downs of the restaurant business years before. Our conversations were cautious but hopeful. I laid bare my fears and ambitions. His voice on the other end of the line was sober but encouraging, seasoned by experience. When he offered a small loan to help me take the first steps forward, it was like a quiet wind that nudged the sails of my resolve. Planning unfolded slowly. I watched the neighborhood's tastes, noting trends and gaps. I scouted a modest space across the street, a place unassuming but filled with quiet charm and potential. It wasn't flashy, far from it, but it felt right, a blank canvas that whispered promise rather than pretension. Decorating that space became a labor of love. I scrubbed old walls, envisioned soft sunlight warming wooden tables, selected colors that echoed the gentle tones of my grandmother's kitchen. Vintage crockery, faded linens rescued from thrift stores, and simple floral arrangements were brought together with care. Each detail was a small reclaiming, a step in setting the stage for the stories I meant to serve. Rachel and Tom's Bistro was well established, their influence casting a long, intimidating shadow. But my voice, long silent under their jeers, was beginning to take form again, not with anger, but with calm conviction. If words had failed, then food would speak with truth and warmth. This newfound purpose became my anchor, steadiness through restless nights and busy days alike. Each careful plan, each perfected recipe was a brick laid in the foundation of something deeper. My place in my community, my claim to respect, my quiet assertion of worth. In the intervals between chopping and tasting, a clarity emerged. This journey was about more than opening a restaurant. It was a battle to preserve a lineage of women who cooked through hardship and hope, who carried the weight of history with grace and resilience. The mockery from across the street had sparked a fierce determination born of patient strength and love. As days turned to weeks, a focused mission emerged to create a place where food would nourish both body and soul, rooted in heritage and community. Patience and history were my guides. In the simmering silence of preparation, I found the courage to begin this new chapter, ready to meet the challenges ahead and to uncover the depths of my own strength. Once I made the decision to move forward, the days blended into a rhythm of quiet preparation and hopeful determination. Reviving my grandmother's recipes was the heart of the plan, yet I approached each dish not as a rigid relic, but as a living story, embroidered with the experiences I had gathered myself. Early mornings began with peeling, chopping, stirring, the kitchen filling with the rich aromas of herbs and simmering sauces that carried the weight of generations. It was more than cooking, it was a connection to a lineage of strong women whose love and resilience were folded into each bite. The act of cooking became a ritual, a meditation in motion. I ran my fingers over the texture of fresh vegetables, inhaled carefully balanced blends of garlic, rosemary, and thyme, and tasted sauces again and again, adjusting spices with the precision of a sculptor shaping a masterpiece. While Rachel and Tom's Bistro boomed with flashy lights and exotic variations, I focused on the authentic, the flavor of patience, care, and tradition. Each bite was to be a quiet declaration that heritage remained vibrant and worthy. Simultaneously, I dived into the business side, unearthing knowledge buried beneath years of domestic life. Nights were spent with piles of papers, books, and glowing screens as I absorbed everything from public health codes to profit margins. My husband's lessons ringing clear, the years I had managed the shop's finances gave me a foundation to build on. I knew that passion alone would not sustain the dream. It needed careful handling. Finances were a hurdle that loomed large and often filled me with anxiety. My savings could cover some basics, but I needed more. After much reflection, I reached out to James, an old business acquaintance who had always believed in my skills. Our conversation was honest, hopeful. He listened with patience, encouraging my vision before offering a modest loan that would seed the venture. That act of trust became a lifeline, turning hope into concrete possibility. Sourcing local ingredients became a joyful campaign of rediscovery. I connected with farmers who practice sustainable methods, valuing quality over speed. Early mornings at the market became part of my routine, selecting plump heirloom tomatoes, fragrant basil leaves, and tender cuts of meat imbued with flavor and care. Each vendor became a partner in this shared belief in community and craft. These relationships added layers of meaning to what I was creating. Next, I turned my attention to the space, modest and unpolished, that I had discovered charming despite its flaws. It sat just across from Rachel and Tom's shiny bistro, modest in size and appearance, but imbued with quiet promise. The peeling paint on its walls and creaky floorboards echoed stories I longed to honor rather than erase. This was not a place for ostentation, but rather the kind of warmth and welcome that spoke softly of home. Day after day, I scrubbed and painted, renewing the space with loving care. The colors I chose, warm cream, muted sage, and terracotta, paid homage to the kitchen where my grandmother had taught me that food was an act of love. I hunted for vintage dishes and linens, each piece carrying imperfections that told stories and deepened the sense of history. Collecting these small treasures became an act of reclaiming, crafting a stage for culinary tales that I would unfold soon. My son often helped, sometimes watching, other times carrying linens or stacking plates with the seriousness of a budding apprentice. I could see him absorbing the roots of this endeavor, even if he couldn't articulate it yet. His presence reminded me that this was not just about business, but about legacy, about handing down stories and values, not through words alone, but through the meals and spaces we create. All the while, Rachel and Tom's presence loomed, literally and figuratively. Their bistro was a beacon of modern success, loud and brash, a sharp contrast to the gentle nurturing I was cultivating across the street. I knew they watched with thinly veiled curiosity, perhaps annoyance, maybe even disbelief. But I was no longer the meek woman they mocked. I was quietly carving my own space, confident and steadfast. The first time I stood in the almost ready room, I took a deep breath as if drawing in hope itself. This was not simply a restaurant, it was a home for memories, a sanctuary where food and story intertwined. If Rachel and Tom measured worth by noise and flair, mine would be measured by warmth, patience, and authenticity, the slow burn rather than the flash fire. Marketing was approached with the same quiet intention. I did not have the budget for flashy campaigns, but I had narrative, the soul of every recipe, every ingredient. Invitations were handwritten, telling not just where and when, but why. A tale of heritage, of family, of celebration through food. I wanted to reach those who craved connection more than trend, an invitation to slow down and taste what mattered. My son's curiosity about the work grew each day. He asked questions about the old recipes, about memories stirred by food, and why these dishes mattered so deeply. I shared stories of my grandmother's laughter filling the kitchen, her hands shaping dough with kindness and determination, the way food had always been a language of love in our family. These moments planted early seeds, teaching him the quiet power of history carried forward. Night after night, I refined the recipes, mindful of every balance and nuance. Some demanded small changes, perhaps a pinch more salt or a slightly longer simmer, but others spoke so clearly of the past that tears gathered unbidden as I cooked. Each stirring was a conversation with history, each tasting a step toward what was to come. Obstacles appeared, as they inevitably would. Juggling household demands, finances, supplier negotiations became a test of endurance and resolve. There were times my spirit faltered, evenings when fatigue weighed heavily, But always the kitchen was a refuge, a place where purpose was rekindled, where the rhythm of chopping and stirring reassured me that I was on the right path. As the weeks passed, a sense of purpose blossomed into certainty. The dream took shape not only in my mind, but in the tangible excitement of knowing that soon the neighborhood would have a new place to come to, a place where meals would heal, comfort, and connect. In the painstaking preparation, the highs and lows, I reclaimed pieces of myself I feared had been lost beneath the dismissiveness across the street. This project was more than business. It was a testament to patience, to dedication, to the enduring power of love passed down through generations. Slowly, piece by piece, through steady hands and heart, I was building more than a restaurant. I was building justice, reclaiming my voice, and crafting a presence no noise or mockery could diminish. Opening day arrived with the stillness of dawn, the quiet hum of possibility hanging thick in the air. Grandma's kitchen was no longer just a dream or a plan sketched on paper. It was a tangible space alive with the warm scent of simmering stews, fresh bread cooling on counters, and the hush of anticipation as community members began to gather. I stood just inside, heart a delicate flutter between nervousness and hope, my hands steady despite the weight of what this moment meant, not just for me, but for the story I was reviving. The menu reflected simplicity and sincerity. Each dish was crafted with care, rooted in my grandmother's recipes, yet softened with subtle touches of my own experience. There were no pretensions here, no culinary stunts, just meals made to comfort the soul and honor time. Every plate was a story unfolding in flavors, slow-cooked pot roasts rich with herbs, vegetables steeped in love, crusty breads embracing warm, melted butter with a familiarity that spoke louder than any flashy presentation. The doors opened wide, and the neighborhood came in, slowly at first, then with growing curiosity. The space felt alive with the soft murmur of conversation, the sound of reconnection. Patrons smiled warmly, recognizing tastes from memories long tucked away, feeling the embrace of authentic cooking that spoke of home. What had once been a private sanctuary had grown into a shared hearth. Marketing had been gentle, a quiet invitation that found ears ready to listen. News traveled by word of mouth, neighbors talking over fences and coffee tables about the place that served food with history and heart. Our little kitchen was becoming a haven, a place where plates were not just filled, but hearts were touched, where strangers became neighbors over shared nourishment. With each passing service, I found a deep satisfaction in the flow of work. The steady rhythm of chopping, stirring, plating became a familiar dance, where every action was intentional, every taste reflective of something far greater than sustenance. I watched as families lingered longer than they needed, swapping stories and smiles, the atmosphere full of a tangible warmth that no extravagant setting could manufacture. The clientele was varied but united in appreciation. Elderly couples who reminisced over the familiar flavors of their youth, young parents seeking comfort meals that reminded them of their own childhoods, food lovers eager for genuine tradition. They savored each bite as if tasting not just recipes, but the lineage of care and sacrifice behind them. Even as the success warmed my spirit, I remained aware of the looming presence across the street. Rachel and Tom's Bistro, with its flashing neon and booming music, was a constant reminder of the contrasting worlds that shared this neighborhood. Their establishment, once full to bursting, began to feel the shift as more people crossed to ours, drawn by the authenticity and calm my kitchen offered. The change was palpable. Gone was their previous air of easy dismissal. I noticed the tension creeping into Rachel and Tom's interactions, their lip curls no longer full of mockery, but edged with frustration, their laughter sometimes brittle and forced. Their business patterns shifted too. Quieter nights, empty tables that once brimmed with eager diners. Their gaze frequently wandered past their own windows toward mine, watching, perhaps unsettled by the quiet revolution unfolding. One afternoon brought an unexpected but deeply validating moment. A local newspaper critic requested a table at Grandma's Kitchen. The invitation to be reviewed by someone beyond our regulars was a signal that the whispers about my humble restaurant had crossed into a wider conversation. I prepared for their visit with meticulous care, each dish a message wrought in flavor and memory. The critic arrived on a full lunch service and immediately settled into the warm atmosphere, soaking in the gentle lighting and comforting presence. As they tasted the pot roast slow-cooked to tender perfection, the fresh-baked bread, and the simple, deeply flavored vegetables, I watched for the slightest hint of reaction. Their smile at the end of the meal was a private victory. Days later, the review was published, a striking piece filled with praise. It celebrated Grandma's Kitchen as a haven for authenticity and tradition in an age awash with flash and fleeting trends. The article's warmth contrasted sharply with the harsh critiques often leveled at Rachel and Tom's Bistro, emphasizing the soulfulness and wholeheartedness that permeated every corner of my endeavor. The reverberations of this acclaim were swift. Neighbors flocked in greater numbers, stories of their experience spreading like wildfire. The community found in my restaurant more than food. It found a rallying point, a place tethered to heritage and genuine care. I worked tirelessly to meet the demand without losing the essence of what made the kitchen special, carefully preserving quality over quantity. Rachel and Tom took note, their corporate front now cracking under the strain. The confident sneers turned to whispered meetings, voices rising in volatile combinations behind closed doors. I sensed their discomfort grow as their once thriving empire felt the pull of this quiet but persistent force. One evening, just as the restaurant buzzed softly with satisfied patrons, Rachel and Tom crossed the threshold of Grandma's Kitchen. Their faces bore the strain of days spent clawing at slipping control. Their words, initially sharp and accusatory, masked a deeper envy and fear. They challenged not only my cooking, but my audacity to claim a place in the neighborhood that had long belonged to them in their eyes. I met them not with fire, but with calm and grace. My voice, steady and untainted by anger, acknowledged their influence, but gently reminded them of a simple truth. Sometimes it is the quietest voices who leave the deepest marks. Recognition flickered in their eyes, mingled with reluctant respect and confusion. The confrontation was brief but charged, a silent acknowledgement that the balance of power was shifting. When they left, a profound peace settled over the room. The battle was far from over, yet the moment marked a turning point. The quiet kitchen I had built was no longer a secret corner. It was a living, pulsating testament to resilience and dignity. Surrounded by the warm glow of the dining room and the contented smiles of my customers, I understood that this was more than a business triumph. It was a reclaiming of identity, a restoration of pride, and a quiet revolution told through simmering pots and steaming plates. The future was still uncertain. Competitors would seek to challenge the new realities I had forged. But each plate served, each smile shared, each whispered compliment in the fading light was a brick in a foundation strong enough to withstand storms. In the gentle clinking of cutlery and muted laughter of satisfied guests, I found strength deeper than any harsh word or mocking laugh. For in this simmering silence, I had truly found my strength. Rachel and Tom's world, once unwavering and triumphant, started to crumble beneath the weight of a truth they hadn't foreseen. Their windows, once glowing brightly with the promise of bold innovation and buzzing energy, now dimmed as the crowds thinned. Tables that used to overflow with chatter and laughter stood empty longer and longer. The lively music they played reduced gradually to hollow echoes. Their presence, so dominant and assured, was quietly being challenged by something they had dismissed: authenticity rooted in family, tradition, and an unpretentious warmth. Rachel's usual sharp confidence began to fracture. Her words became more biting, her glances harder and more frequent, tinged with frustration and disbelief. Tom, still by her side, but increasingly cautious, watched helplessly as their shared empire felt pressure on every side. Together, they held tightly to the belief that style and trend would always trump substance. Yet, what took root across the street in Grandma's Kitchen proved otherwise, a heartfelt, patient craft that attracted people yearning for real connection through food. One slow afternoon at their bistro, Rachel and Tom huddled anxiously near the counter, voices low but intense, debating desperate measures. Promotions, menu changes, flashy gimmicks, nothing seemed enough to counteract the pull of authenticity reshaping their neighborhood's palate. The atmosphere hung heavy, thick with tension and unspoken fears. Across the street, Grandma's Kitchen blossomed quietly into a beacon for those seeking tradition and comfort. It was a sanctuary filled with soft laughter and the mingled aromas of slow-cooked meals lovingly prepared. The steady rhythm of stirring pots and breaking bread became the soundtrack of a community reawakening to flavors that held stories, memories, and healing. Then, the moment came that caught even me by surprise. A local food critic appeared at the door, their reputation known for sharp, discerning words that could make or break a place. The invitation to host them was a signal that the whispers of Grandma's Kitchen had grown into a chorus that reached beyond our little square. I prepared with care, each dish an offering steeped in history and renewed hope. The critics settled into the warm atmosphere, quiet amidst bustling tables, and tasted with intention. Their satisfied smile after the meal promised more than polite approval. When the review appeared, it wasn't just a critique, it was a celebration of soulfulness in a culinary world often fixated on fleeting fashions. The article praised Grandma's Kitchen for its delicate balance of genuine heritage and heartfelt innovation, an oasis where food was a language spoken in love and memory rather than flash and noise. It stood out starkly against the often surface-level glitz bestowed upon Rachel and Tom's flashy bistro. The public's response was immediate and heartfelt. Crowds who had long felt overlooked by trends flocked to Grandma's Kitchen, drawn by the promise of home-cooked soul food and the familiarity of shared histories. The once quiet spot pulsed with the warmth of community, where people lingered over meals and stories alike. Rachel and Tom felt the tide shift beneath their feet. What was once a comfortable monopoly turned into a sinking hold. Their dismissiveness gave way to tense consultations and angry arguments behind closed doors, their confidence chipped away by the stark new reality sprouting right across the street. And then it happened. One evening, with the restaurant alive in gentle murmur, Rachel and Tom walked through Grandma's Kitchen's door. Their faces bore the strain of relentless days spent clawing for control. Their sharp words flared, questions about territory and accusations thinly veiled in rivalry. Their challenge was not only about food, but about me claiming a place they believed belonged to them. But instead of matching their anger, I met them with calm and grace. My voice stayed steady, untainted by bitterness, as I acknowledged their impact and role in the neighborhood's dining scene. Yet I gently reminded them that sometimes the quietest voices are the ones who make the most lasting impressions. In their eyes, I saw flickers of surprise, hesitant respect, and confusion, all mingled in an unspoken admission that the balance was shifting beneath their feet. The encounter was brief, yet the charged silence that followed was louder than any words. It was a moment of reckoning, where past mockery met present strength. When they left, a heavy stillness settled in the room, deep and profound, a quiet acknowledgement that Grandma's Kitchen had become a force not to be ignored. That night, as gentle candlelight flickered over tables filled with contented smiles and soft voices, a peaceful certainty nestled inside me. This achievement was more than a business widening its doors. It was a restoration of identity, a reclaiming of pride long subdued. Through the simmering pots and steaming plates, a quiet revolution had blossomed. No illusions, the road ahead remained uncertain. Challenges would arise anew, competition would sharpen, Yet each meal served, every smile exchanged, every whispered thanks whispered through fading light became another steady stone in a foundation strong enough to withstand the harshest storms. Amidst the gentle clinking of cutlery and the warm laughter of guests, I felt a strength surpassing any harsh word, any mocking laugh hurled from across the street. In the simmering silence of Grandma's kitchen, I had found a wellspring of power, quiet, steady, and unyielding. Grandma's kitchen had become more than just a place to eat. It had blossomed into a sanctuary, a space where old stories stirred alongside fresh memories, where the warmth of family filled the air heavier than any aroma from the kitchen. As the days passed and seasons turned, I watched the community gather around our tables. They came not only for food, but for connection, comfort, and a quiet reminder of roots that study the soul. Each visiting face, each returning smile, was a thread weaving us tighter into the fabric of our neighborhood. Rachel and Tom's once dominant bistro, meanwhile, struggled to hold on to the crowds and the glory that had fueled their swagger. Their flashy signs and loud music no longer pulled the masses as they once did. Tables sat empty with increasing frequency, shadows of the busy dinners they had enjoyed just months before, stretching longer in the fading light. Their laughter no longer boomed with confidence, but often seemed forced, brittle, as if cracking under the weight of unspoken defeat. I never reveled in their decline. My victory was not in their loss, but in what Grandma's kitchen represented, a reclaiming of identity and dignity through cooking that spoke soul-deep truths rather than hollow trends. Their bistro's fading light was a backdrop against which my simple space glowed with authenticity and grace. Much had changed in me throughout this journey. The pain and humiliation I once carried like a heavy burden softened into a steady flame of purpose and pride. I saw it reflected in my son's eyes, the way his small hands helped at the tables, and his curiosity grew into understanding. He learned not only recipes, but the power of heritage and perseverance. Our work had become a legacy, not just food on a plate, but the quiet strength passed from one generation to the next. Each evening, as the last customers left and light dimmed to a soft glow, I stood by the window of the kitchen, looking out onto the street. The world outside was busy, ever-changing, but inside this little haven, time seemed to slow. The chatter faded to a gentle hush, utensils clinked softly, and the kitchen's warmth lingered in my bones. In those still moments, I whispered the phrase that had sustained me since the beginning. In the simmering silence, I found my strength. It was not a boast, but a reminder, a quiet tribute to the power found in patience, resilience, and love unspoken yet deeply felt. I understood then that my triumph was not merely the success of a business, but the restoration of a narrative that had been in danger of fading. Through every simmering pot, every carefully folded dough, I had reclaimed more than a place in the market. I had reclaimed my identity, my worth as a mother, a cook, a keeper of stories. The road ahead would bring its trials, new challenges, fresh competition, unforeseen storms. But I had learned that strength often lives in the steady flame, not the fleeting blaze. With every meal served, every familiar face smiling, every whispered word of thanks, I fortified the foundation that held Grandma's kitchen and myself firm and unshakable. That kitchen was my home, my sanctuary, and my battlefield, where dignity was won not through noise, but through the enduring power of quiet faith. No matter what came next, I knew I would weather it with the same calm resolve, stirred through years of struggle and love. In the gentle ebb of night, with only the scent of herbs and slow-cooked memories surrounding me, I found peace. The strength I had sought was not a roar or a shout, but a simmering certainty deep in my bones, a strength that whispered with the silence, and spoke volumes in its steadfastness.